Welcome back, Peter.
Yeah, we're here.
I don't know what month recording this is for. I think it's for for last month, but it's okay. I don't think too many people are gonna be worried about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna kick off with The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So I'll do the usual book intro summary, and then we can chat through it.
Cool.
Right. Okay. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle explains that much of human suffering comes from how we relate to our own thoughts and identify with them. Most people spend a large part of their time thinking about the past and the future. Over time, this creates a constant mental story about who we are, what is wrong, and what needs to change. Tolle calls this mental identity the ego. The ego is not a separate thing inside of us, but a sense of self that arises through identification with thoughts, memories, opinions, and personal history. When we believe this mental story is who we are, we become emotionally affected by it and often experience stress, fear, or dissatisfaction. Tolle contrasts this with what he calls being, a deeper sense of awareness that is present when we are not lost in thought. This awareness is realized in the now, the present moment that is always already here. The book presents the now not just as an idea to believe in, but as the only place where life is actually experienced, and the doorway to what Tolle calls inner peace or enlightenment. Yeah, Peter, what do you have to add?
Yeah, not much. I think, we'll get to it, but like you said, the whole, one other thing that stood out, and I think something that I've spoken to a few people about. It was a conversation I had with someone last year about how kind of we're responsible for our own suffering, and I think the way we reframe how we think about certain things is essentially what helps us get out of suffering. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think that's kind of the message that has propagated through the book. And I mean, the way he started the book for me actually was a very good indication, and something that I think we often hear, but for me it has just never been put in that sense of the guy that was big and was sitting on some sort of box, and then he was asked like, have you tried opening what you're sitting on, and it's kind of solidifying that we have the power to change our state of mind. We have, like everything that, and this is saying it with a pinch of salt, but everything that happens to us is because of us. But again, that's what I'm saying, with a pinch of salt, knowing that because there are certain things that are inflicted on us, etc. You can't say if someone hits you, that's because of you. No, but essentially it's then how you...
I suppose it depends in that example. But yeah.
It also depends, yes. That's if you agitated the person, but it's how you then respond to that situation. That's that determines how that particular situation affects you. But yeah, I'm rambling on. But yeah, that's what I think wanted to add. Yeah,
there's a lot of interesting parts in the book. The book as a whole, I will lay it on the ground at the start. I do find it a bit strange. It's interesting. It's a very mystical book. Would not, if someone is Well, I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't recommend it to someone who's like very against the mystical things, because maybe it is something for them to just be like, okay, like let me think about that a little bit. But I don't think I would recommend it to most people. And yeah, but I guess let's dig into it more and we can start seeing it. But I think one of the core takeaways for me is just it's helpful, the framing that the book gives on not being caught up with our mental images of things and our mental understanding of things, and trying to almost take a step back from that, of which one of the things, like you said, is pain and a struggle and that kind of thing in life. And the way that we view that, we can actually take a step back from it and be like, oh, okay, like I thought that this was a really difficult, painful thing, but actually it's a lesson in life or something. Yeah. But I think let's start with the preface, and then we're going to run through in the usual way, just read through a few snippets and then chat through our takeaways. Okay, so starting with the preface on page XII, he says, this need, as well as readiness in millions of people for the arising of a new consciousness, is the context within which the success of the power of now must be seen and understood. This does not mean, of course, that everyone responds favorably to the book. Anyone who is still totally identified with the voice in their head, the stream of involuntary, incessant thinking, will inevitably fail to see what the power of now is about. Mumbo Jumbo was all that the Time magazine could see in the book that countless people around the globe found life-changing. And then towards the end he says, I feel confident the power of now will continue to make a vital contribution to the arising of a new consciousness and more enlightened humanity. And that's in 2004. Eckhart Tolle wrote that. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's completely mumbo jumbo, but I also can't say that I'm fully in the identified with the book camp, but I think that there are a lot of takeaways from it, and probably what you'll find is the parts that we jump through in the podcast won't be as mystical, and if you were to read the book as a whole, it leans a bit more towards that, and it can be quite difficult to understand the book, or I don't know, that's what I found. I don't know how you found it, Peter.
Yeah, it's, how can I put it? It's more of like, and not really, I want to say information overload, but that sort of funnel. So you have to be very, I want to say very selective, but probably not the word, but like you said, there's a lot of information trying to deliver the point. I don't know if if I'm making sense by that. It could have been more concise, but eventually the point sort of comes through. Yeah.
I think I agree with that, and he does even say something along those lines, like just give it time almost, and the ideas will sink in. But I think one of the challenges that I found was also the language that's used.
Yeah.
So he kind of defines terms, even like things like the ego and stuff is a term defined by him, even though it's a generally used term. He's like, don't think about the terms that other people have defined. I'm going to define it in a specific way in the book. So you're kind of learning these concepts, and it can be helpful because he's trying to convey a certain thing, but sometimes it can be quite confusing. And also at the same time, I think it can, especially a book like this, it can give it almost more of a mystical feeling than it's supposed to have, because you kind of don't really understand what he's saying, but at the same time, the things that he's saying are pretty simple. And it's interesting to read the book because he often says that about the things that he's saying. He's like, look, if you don't understand it, don't worry about it, but it's actually supposed to be extremely simple. It's often a theme that comes up in the book. And I can see why he says that. Like, some of the concepts, like the pain body, I did not understand what the pain body was. And then I will be honest, I had to go to ChatGPT and ask it a few questions. And then on coming back to the idea of the pain body, I'm like, oh, okay, it's pretty simple. As far as I understand, the pain body is just as you go through life, you have experiences of pain in the past, and it's kind of an accumulation of those experiences that you're holding on to in a kind of a bad way. And that's the pain body. But when you're reading the chapter and he mentions the pain body, you're like, what is this mystical thing? Yeah. So I found it challenging for those reasons.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that I would say the whole book is just mumbo jumbo, as the Times would say. But I do think that there's a bunch of things that I disagree with as well. Like often the way that he quotes the Bible is definitely I wouldn't say orthodox. But yeah. Right. I don't know if there's any last things to add to the preface there, or should we go on to the next one?
I can go on to the next one.
Cool. Okay, so then the foreword, just a few little snippets from that. So, XVIII.
That's 8.
I will trust you on that, Peter.
No, not 8. Sorry. 8.
There we go. You see, it's something. It's a Roman numeral, and that's what matters. He says, and this is Russell E. DiCarlo that's giving the foreword. He says, at the core of this New World view involves seeing yourself, others, and all life not through the eyes of our small earthly self that lives in time and is born in time, but rather through the eyes of the soul, our being, the true self. One by one, people are jumping to this higher orbit. Eckhart's message, the problem of humanity, is deeply rooted. Eckhart's message is that the problem of humanity is deeply rooted in the mind itself, or rather, our misidentification with the mind. Our drifting awareness, our tendency to take the path of least resistance by being less than fully awake to the present moment. Seldom do we find ourselves resting in the oceanic depth of the here and now. And then towards the end, he says, where is the proof of this greater reality, you ask? I offer you only an analogy. A battery of scientists can get together and tell you about all the scientific proof for the fact that bananas are bitter, but all you have to do is taste one once to realize that there's a whole other aspect to bananas. Oh, any thoughts there, Peter?
No thoughts there. We can move on.
Cool. I just want to mention the one thing is the mind identification problem, which I think comes up every now and again, and I think that's it'll come up in a soon to appear chapter. Okay, next one is the introduction. So he says, and this is Eckhart now. Until my 30th year, I lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety, interspersed with periods of suicidal depression. It feels now as if I'm trying to talk about some past life or somebody else's life, One night, not long after my 29th birthday, I woke up in the early hours feeling an absolute dread. And then he said, I cannot live with myself any longer. And then suddenly I became aware of what a peculiar thought that was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, the I and the self, that I cannot live with. Maybe, I thought, only one of them is real. Then on to the next page. For the next 5 months, I lived in a state of uninterrupted peace and bliss. After that, it diminished somewhat in intensity. Perhaps it just seemed so because it became my natural state. And then a bit further. Later, people occasionally would come to me and say, I want to have what you have. Can you give me or show me how to get it? And I would say, you have it already. You can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. That answer later grew into the book that you're holding in your hands. Then on to the next page. The book in its present form originated often spontaneously in response to questions asked by individuals in seminars, meditation classes, and private counseling sessions. And so I've kept the question-answer format. I learned and received as much as those classes and sessions as the questioners. And then on the next page. As you begin reading this book, the meaning of certain words such as being or presence may not be entirely clear to you at first. Just read on. Questions or objections may occasionally come to your mind as you read. They will probably be answered later in the book, or they may turn out to be irrelevant as you go more deeply into the teaching and into yourself. Then on the next page, I cannot tell you any spiritual truth that deeply within you do not know already. All I can do is remind you of what you have forgotten. Yeah, that is the introduction. Anything to add there, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it's you had said it earlier about the being and presence, how he sort of uses them differently throughout the book, and yeah, like I said, it kind of makes it hard because it's like you unlearning what you know and learning something instead of just kind of going through with the flow of the book. But yeah, the one thing that stood out there was just what he said initially, and it's somewhat relates to what I said in the beginning about how the one moment he was filled with anxiety and suicidal thoughts and, and I think it's a concept that he does talk about as well later in the book about when you have to sort of be still, and I might be getting this confused, but kind of saying the reason why it's so hard to be in a state of not thinking is because you're sort of like going against the grain, because we're so conditioned, or we have that thing of if our mind's not busy, then something is wrong, but it's subconsciously ingrained in us that we don't even realize it, and yeah, for him as well, it's like, and I mean, for people that struggle with anxiety and depression, it's this thing of where, again, it's in the mind. It's not what's happening around them that's causing them to feel that way. It's how they're reacting to certain situation that then drives them to think like that, But yeah, it was quite of interesting on how and I think it also takes awareness to be like, 1 minute I was in this state and all of a sudden I was no longer, and acknowledging the fact that you're in that space for so long. But yeah, and it's, for me, reading that is like, just for people out there that it is possible. Like, again, not as you said that he quotes the Bible in weird ways, but the Bible also speaks about these things and how, and I think to me what was interesting was how he said it towards the end about how when people say a situation changed their life, it's not because the situation did, but it's when they've come to the realization and actually surrendered to be like, this is where I'm at, is when that transformation sort of happened. I think that was quite important for me. And this in the beginning is, as much as it didn't say that, but me reading it or hearing back now is one of those sort of moments. Yeah.
Yeah. The main part that stood out for me is just that part where he realizes that there's something about the him that's thinking things and the ability to observe that as well. So like it's a strange thing that we can observe our own thoughts. And it seems like it's around that time when he sort of clicks into like, oh wait, and then he if you read the book in more detail, then you sort of see, okay, like that's when he starts to feel this almost like enlightenment, and then that frees him from his struggles, which I find it's a very interesting thing, and I've always found it something that's strange. The fact that we like almost conscious of our consciousness. Anyway, should we go to the next chapter?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually chapter 1. We are now officially starting the book. The chapter 1 is titled "You Are Not Your Mind." I'm going to read the snippets from here. So starting on page 10, the word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego likes to keep it that way. But it's simply your natural state of felt oneness with being. Then a bit further down, you use the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? So again, you'll see every now and again he has this question answer format, like he said earlier. So yeah, I'm not gonna mention that again, but yeah, if the question answer format appears, it's because of his seminar interactions and those kinds of things, and that this book is flowing from that. Okay, so he says here, you use the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? Being is the eternal, ever-present one life beyond the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. You don't seek to, but don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can know it only when the mind is still. When you are present, when your attention is fully and intensely in the now, being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. And then going on to the next page. What is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? And then he says, identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it. So it's considered normal. Then on the next page, thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there's nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body, but when this process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have disease. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. Then to the next page. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. Then onto the next page. So when you listen to a thought, you are aware not only of one thought, but also of yourself as a witness of that thought. As you listen to the thought, you feel a conscious presence, your deeper self, behind or underneath the thought, as it were. Then it is not a trance-like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. And then on the next page, instead of watching the thinker, you can also create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is a deeply satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from mind activity and create a gap of no mind, in which you are highly alert and aware, but not thinking. This is the essence of meditation. Then a bit further down. So the single most vital step in your journey towards enlightenment is to learn to disidentify from your mind. Then later, as you grow up, you form a mental image of who you are based on your personal and cultural conditioning. We may call this phantom self the ego. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it here, it means the false self, created by unconscious identification with the mind. Even when the ego seems to be concerned with the present, it is not the present that it sees. It misperceives it completely because it looks at it through the eyes of the past, or it reduces the present to a means to an end that always lies in the mind's projected future. The present moment, now, holds the key to liberation, but you cannot find the present moment as long as you are in your mind, as long as you are your mind. And then on page 24, pleasure is always derived from something outside you, whereas joy arises from within. The very thing that gives you pleasure today will give you pain tomorrow, or it will leave you. So its absence will give you pain. Then on the next page, all cravings are the mind seeking salvation or fulfillment in external things, and in the future as a substitute for the joy of being. In that state, even my desire to become free or enlightened is just another craving for fulfillment or completion in the future. So don't seek to become free or desire to achieve enlightenment. Simply become present. Yeah, that is, you are not your mind. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, for me, I think, I know you've gone through much, but I'll just maybe latch onto 2 points. I think it's what you said earlier, where it says the mind is a superb instrument if used right. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. I think for me, the reason I'm saying that is because of, I think I said it at the beginning of how, as much as, we don't realize it, but we are responsible for how we feel. And again, that's the mind. And the mind is powerful enough that when you find yourself in a slump, for you to sort of take yourself out of that. You don't need other people. And it's always interesting, like, people seek happiness from others or from things around, and it over time you realize, and from that line, like again, it's driving that point that it's up to you essentially, to sort of, and again, that's how powerful the mind is, and I think we don't realize that. Yeah, and the last one is just also that whole, the differentiation between joy and happiness. How happiness can be momentarily, but joy comes from within. and again, that also is like and again, it's like joy is also like one of the fruits of the spirits. It doesn't say the fruit of the spirits, happiness, is rather joy. And, that comes from within. You have to be in that state and embrace that state, and it's supposed to be long lasting. So, yeah.
I just want to comment on your comment about the mind being powerful and being able to. So I agree with you. I just am not sure that Eckhart would completely agree with you. I think he would agree with you to some degree. But he's almost trying to pull us away from the mind, and he's saying that there's this deeper thing called being. And if you're stuck in the thought realm the whole time, then you'll kind of always be stuck in that realm of problems and past and future and that. Whereas if you can get to this state of being, then you can be more calmly just existing, and in some strange way, it's through that we're able to face the problems and not be affected by them. Even though what I would say is, in general, it's actually more just, if you try and think about things differently, then a lot of your problems can go away. So I think I agree with what you're saying more than with what Eckhart is saying. But at the same time, I just want to try. I'm trying to understand what he's saying. But it's very difficult. But yeah. Maybe, so I've got a little set of notes about the chapter that maybe I can quickly scan through just to sort of try and tease out some of the concepts, although I think I will still fail miserably. But so I've got here, when he speaks about being, he isn't referring to God, a soul in the traditional sense, or simply the fact that something exists. He uses the word to point to what he sees as the deepest aspect of consciousness, the awareness that exists before thoughts, emotions, and personal identity. So it's somehow that observing the thinker, the thing that's observing the thinker, which I would argue is a thought as well, but I don't really know. And then he says, or I've got here, a helpful way to distinguish the three layers is thinking is the constant stream of mental activity. I need to do this. I'm this kind of person. What if this or that? Then the self, or the ego, is the identity built from memories, beliefs, achievements, fears, roles, and the identity constructed from those thoughts. So things like I'm successful, I'm a failure, people don't respect me, or they do, etc. That's the ego from the past, and sometimes from the future. And then being is the silent awareness in which all of those thoughts and identities appear. This is what you can directly experience by becoming present. And then for Tolle, most people make the mistake where the first two is who they think that they are, and his central claim is that your deepest identity is in the third one, in your being. And the mistake that we make is that we identify with the first two. Well, yeah. Don't know if that's helpful at all, but it is what it is.
Made it more confusing, but yeah, it is what it is.
Don't think through it, Peter, is what I've learned.
Yeah.
Just let it be. Okay, should we go to chapter 2, consciousness?
Yeah.
So consciousness, the way out of pain. So starting on page 28. Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life. Whereas before you dwelt in time and paid brief visits to the now, have your dwelling place in the now and pay brief visits to the past and future when required to deal with practical aspects of your life situation. Then to the next page. The present moment is sometimes unacceptable, unpleasant, or awful, is what someone said. And then he responds, "It is as it is. Observe how the mind labels it and how this labeling process continues sitting in judgment, creates pain and unhappiness. By watching the mechanics of the mind, you step out of the resistance patterns and you can allow the present moment to be." And a bit further down, he talks about dissolving the pain body. As long as you are unable to access the power of now, every emotional pain that you experience leaves behind a residue of pain that lives in you, that occupies your body and your mind. And then a bit further, the pain body is the dark shadow cast by the ego. Then to page 32. Where there's anger, there is always pain underneath. And then to the next page. Let me summarize the process. Focus your attention on the feeling inside you. Know that it is the pain body. Accept that it is there. Don't think about it. Don't let the feeling turn into thinking. Don't judge or analyze. Don't make an identity for yourself out of it. Stay present and continue to be the observer of what is happening inside you. Then to the next page, ego identification with the pain body. The process that I have described is profoundly powerful, yet simple. It could be taught to a child. And then to page 37, the ego's search for wholeness. Another aspect of the emotional pain is that an intrinsic part of the egoic mind is a deep-seated sense of lack of or incompleteness, of not being whole. In some people, this is conscious; in others, unconscious. If it is conscious, it manifests as the unsettling and constant feeling of not being worthy or good enough. If it is unconscious, it will only be felt indirectly as an intense craving, a wanting, a needing. In either case, people will often enter into compulsive pursuit after possessions, money, success, power, recognition, or special relationship. But even when they attain all these things, they soon find that the hole is still there, and that it's bottomless. As long as the egoic mind is running your life, you cannot truly be at ease. You cannot be at peace or fulfilled except for brief intervals when you obtained what you wanted. Yeah, that is the way out of pain. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, so I'll probably do the last one you read now, but it's earlier in the book when you mention about not in the book, in the chapter, about dissolving the pain body. But again, you did touch about the pain body, and what came to mind was when you were saying how you then read back and sort of understood what it actually means. It reminds me of this book a friend recommended. I want to say we should do it, but it's like really long. It's called The Body
That
Keeps
is not
Score.
our strong suit.
That's not our strong suit. And it's exactly that concept of that. And I remember we having like me and my friend having a conversation about it, and I've had it with a few friends at different, but the conversations we had about how, for instance, how we react to certain things as adults is as a result of what we experience when we're young, you know. But yeah, I was just trying to echo that, to be like that. and from that point of that again, the way to sort of and how the book has put it is like, if you don't access the power of now, then you always sort of cling on to that, and yeah, I think ultimately, for me, I'd believe is like, we need to try as much as to be very conscious and aware of that, to sort of work against that grain, so to say.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to comment on is like, where it says, as long as the egoic mind is running your life, you cannot truly be at ease. You cannot be at peace or fulfilled except by brief intervals when you obtain what you wanted. When a craving has just been fulfilled, and surprising, that's sad. If you actually look at it in that nature, to be like, and that section also sort of highlighted sort of people's intents when it comes to doing things, and I mean, that's how I looked at it when I was reading through that part, to be like, it almost always is, and if you dig down, when you say like, people come to you, be like, I like helping people, and you're like, okay, why? I know it's an odd question, but if you ask like, why? And most people will give you an answer that will surprise you, and deep down, you won't have to say to them, but you actually just satisfy. Like, I've had someone say, like, explain why they help people, and you're like, you do realize that what you've said is just, it just makes them feel a lot powerful that they're helping others. And like, I don't think, that's right. But to realize that if that's how people do things, it's a strange part. But the reason I know I've taken a roundabout route to it, but towards the end, it talks about how that essentially is kind of being in a state of reaction as a human being. You do things reactively instead of doing things for the sake of doing it. And that's exactly that, when it gets to be like, because you're reacting and you're satisfied with your outcome, then you get those bursts of happiness, but essentially you kind of fall back to a state that you don't like. And it's, again, one of those things that I just want to highlight, that like we really need to be very cognizant of be very aware. And probably takes a lot, but yeah, that was just something that was brought out by that section for me.
Yeah, I think those are good points. Just trying to be aware of, I guess how things shape us, and what our motivations are for those things. Because like you say, is the person helping someone for themselves, or are they helping someone because they are happy to help someone? And I think we often trick ourselves into thinking, sometimes people will reveal their true motives just bluntly and be like, it makes me feel good. But sometimes we sort of hide our true motives and we're like, no, I'm helping because it's the right thing to do. Meantime, it's some ego thing where it's like, if I do this, people will perceive me as a good person or something like that. And I think this, for me, this chapter, so it's titled again, the way out of pain, and I think he's trying to say something along the lines of, we have this ego, like you were saying, this ego, and the ego is built up from our past and our the things that we've achieved, or our fears and our role in life and our memories in general. And so we sort of see ourselves as this is who we are. And within, I don't know if Eckhart would say this, but it seems like he's sort of saying almost within the ego, there's this piece called the pain body. And the pain body is the accumulation of all those emotional pains that you've had over your life and you sort of holding on to. So we have the ego and we have the pain body. And we essentially have this person or this identity that we think that we are, and we hold on to that, and we try and do things to sort of, I don't know how to phrase it, but to stoke our ego, or our egoic self. And he's trying to say the way out of that, because that's a very painful place to be in. If everything you're doing is for your ego, it's always going to be fleeting and temporary and difficult. And even when it's not difficult, when it's pleasurable, it's only for a brief moment. And that's just not a nice way to be. And so the way out of that pain is by sort of stepping outside of that ego into, again, what he calls being, and sort of focusing on the now is one way to do that, or the main way for him to do that. But yeah, interesting points that he's made. But I still, I'll try and not keep on saying it for the rest of the book. I find it confusing. I think I understand parts of it, but yeah, some of it is still confusing. Cool. Chapter 3. Moving deeply into the now. So starting on page 39. He has here, and this is an audience comment that it says, I feel that there's still a great deal I need to learn about the workings of my mind before I can get anywhere near full consciousness or spiritual enlightenment. So Eckhart says, no, you don't. The problems of the mind cannot be solved on the level of the mind. Once you have understood the basic dysfunction, there really isn't much else that you need to learn or understand. I don't know if I mentioned the title of the chapter, but I think I did. But it's moving deeply into the now. And then carrying on. You have already understood the basic mechanics of the unconscious state, identification with the mind, which creates a false self, the ego, as a substitute for your true self rooted in being. Once you know how the basic dysfunction operates, there is no need to explore all its countless manifestations. No need to make it into a complex personal problem. The ego, of course, loves that. Then on to the next page. To be identified with your mind is to be trapped in time, the compulsion to live almost exclusively through memory and anticipation. This creates an endless preoccupation with the past and future, and unwillingness to honor and acknowledge the present moment and allow it to be. Then on page 41. Have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside of the now? Do you think you ever will? Is it possible for anything to happen or be outside the now? The answer is obvious. It is not. Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now. What you think of as the past is a memory trace stored in the mind of a former now. And then on to page, what's the next one? 44. Miser Eckhart, a 13th century spiritual teacher, summed it up all beautifully. Time is what keeps the light from reaching us. There is no greater obstacle to God than time. And then on page 46, learn to use time in the practical aspects of your life. We may call this clock time, but immediately return to the present moment awareness when those practical matters have been dealt with. In this way, there will be no build-up of psychological time, which is the identification with the past and the continuous compulsive projection into the future. The enlightened person's main focus of attention is always the now, but they are still peripherally aware of time. In other words, they continue to use clock time, but are free of psychological time. And then page 50, all negativity is caused by an accumulation of psychological time and denial of the present. Unease, anxiety, tension, stress, worry, all forms of fear are all caused by too much future and not enough present. Guilt, resentment, grievances, sadness, bitterness, and all forms of non-forgiveness are caused by too much past and not enough present. Most people find it difficult to believe that a state of consciousness totally free of all negativity is possible. And yet, this is the liberated state which all spiritual teachings point. It is not an illusionary figure, but right here, right now. Future, but right here, right now. And then page 56. When you act out of the present moment awareness, whatever you do becomes imbued with a sense of quality, care, and love, even the most simple action. Then the next page. On a deeper level, you already are complete. When you realize that, there's playful and joyous energy behind what you do, being free of psychological time. You no longer pursue your goals with grim determination, driven by fear, anger, discontent, or the need to become someone. Nor will you remain inactive through fear or failure, which to the ego is a loss of self. That is it. That is deeply moving into the now. What are your thoughts, Peter?
So for me, going through this chapter, like the more points that were highlighted, I know it will sound as if I'm reducing all that into something simple, but my takeaway was more of being present. You know, it talks about, but it's kind of like, for instance, like anxious worry about the future. It's not there yet, but we're worrying about it, and that sort of disturbs our feeling now, you know, then it holds you back from experiencing what life has to offer in the moment, you know. Same as it comes when you're dwelling in the past, you know. But yeah, essentially, like it says, like getting deeper in the night, it was kind of just cementing the idea of living in the moment, living in the present, like be more, I don't want to say aware, but focus more of what's happening, around. Like, again, that's what I said, it distorts people's thought about time, you know, to be like, but yeah, my takeaway was simply that, to be like, and even at some points, like, to find freedom isn't about talking about the future, it's about, you know, being free now, you know. So yeah, that was kind of, it was a lot of points, but to me that was essentially the main point that was sort of being driven by the chapter. Yeah,
I'd almost argue it's the main point of the book.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think that's a good point and a good takeaway, to that being present is the main thing. And even as he says in the beginning, once you know how the basic dysfunction operates, and the basic dysfunction being like people focusing on the past and the future and all of those kinds of things, and the ego that they've built up from that past or future, once you know how the basic dysfunction operates, there's no need to explore all its countless manifestations. No need to make it into a complex personal problem. The ego, of course, loves that. And I think it's a really helpful and almost disarming way of stating it, where he's kind of saying there's a million different ways that you can try and think through solving your problems. But at the end of the day, if you aren't able to be present, then none of it really matters. And if you can be present, then you kind of start to, those problems start to fade away. If you really can be truly present and not present deeply influenced by the past and all of the hurts and pains and challenges and things like that, or the anxiousness of the future and what might be. Essentially, you end up, if you are really present, you end up taking just the next step, because that's all you can really do, and you try and do that in the best way that you possibly can. And I think it kind of ties into that later statement that he makes on page 56. When you act out of the present moment awareness, whatever you do becomes imbued with a sense of quality, care, and love, even the most simple action. And so if we do that, then naturally things that were difficult and that where we didn't know what the right thing to do is, or you start to just naturally take the right next steps, and the things that you do have a meaning and a quality to them because you are focused. You're not worried about the past or the future. All right, should we go to the next one? Mind strategies for avoiding the now. So on page 59. But I still have to pay the bills tomorrow, and I'm still going to grow old and die just like everyone else. So how can I ever say that I'm free of time? Tomorrow's bills are not the problem. The disillusion of the physical body is not the problem. The loss of now is the problem, or rather the core delusion that turns a mere situation, event, or emotion into a personal problem and into suffering. Then on the next page, you lose the now, and you return to it again and again. Eventually, presence becomes your predominant state. Most humans alternate not between consciousness and unconsciousness, but only between different levels of unconsciousness. And then next one, page 63. Why are you always anxious? Jesus asked his disciples. Can an anxious thought add a single day to your life? And the Buddha taught that the root of suffering is to be found in our constant wanting and craving. And then page 68. Can you give some more examples of ordinary unconsciousness? See if you can catch yourself complaining in either speech or thought about a situation you find yourself in. What other people do or say, your surroundings, your life, even the weather. To complain is always non-acceptance of what is. It invariably carries an unconscious negative charge. Ordinary unconsciousness is always linked in some way to denial of the now. And then page 71. There's nothing wrong with striving to improve your life situation. You can improve your life situation, but you cannot improve your life. Life is primary. Life is your deepest inner being. It is already whole, complete, perfect. There is nothing wrong with setting goals and striving to achieve things. The mistake lies in using it as a substitute for the feeling of life or for being. And then page 73. When you are on a journey, it is certainly helpful to know where you are going, or at least the general direction. But don't forget, the only thing that is ultimately real about your journey is the step that you are taking at this moment. That's all there ever is. Then 75. What is the power of now? None other than the power of your presence, your liberated thought, your consciousness liberated from thought forms. So deal with the past on the level of the present. And that is mind strategies for avoiding the now. Yeah. Any thoughts or comments there?
No, the one comment is just the one about setting goals, and we did speak about it in the previous that it's about the emphasis of the goal, it's like, yes, the goal might be there, but it's like most people will fall apart if they keep identifying things that will make them not attain that goal, and essentially this chapter was kind of like, you sort of have to reframe that to be like, yes, as much as I might have that goal, but what's actually important. And again, like the chapter sort of, the title says it's like strategies of mind strategies for avoiding that. Like the mind will almost always want you to think about those things, of what lies ahead, or maybe what happened in the past for you to, but essentially we need to kind of reframe or sort of identify what's truly important when it comes to that goal. Yeah. But again, like, easier said than done. But yeah. That was sort of my takeaway from it.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's quite a practical one for me, at least, because you kind of often we end up wanting to do things, and then we get so caught up with the end result and the achievement that we end up not even doing anything. And if we do something, it ends up being worse off because we're so focused on the future and what we're going to get from it, rather than just taking step by step. Like if you want to build an app or some product or something like that, as programmers often do, then you do want to have some sort of idea of what you want, some sort of a path or goal ahead, but to fully identify with like, okay, I want to end up, I don't know, making lots of money or get lots of users or those kind of things, ends up being a mistake almost always. Whereas if you just focus on the product and really just spend time now figuring out like, okay, what is the next best thing to build? What is a feature that you enjoy and you feel like building, and so on, then you will probably end up with a lot better result than just focusing on outcomes. Yeah. All right, should we go to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
The state of presence, page 77. You can think about presence, and the mind can't. You can't think about presence, and the mind can't understand it. Understanding presence is being present. Try a little experiment. Close your eyes and say to yourself, "I wonder what my next thought is going to be." Then become very alert and wait for the next thought. Be like a cat watching a mouse hole. What thought is going to come out of the mouse hole? Try it now. Then the idea is that you wait for a little bit and you think about what the next thought is going to be. And then he says later, well, I had to wait for quite a long time before a thought came in. And then going to the next part, page 81. Many people are so imprisoned by their minds that the beauty of nature doesn't really exist for them. They might say, "What a pretty flower," but that's just a mechanical mental labeling, because they are still not present. They don't truly see the flower. And then... oh, that's it. That is all the notes that I had for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess just being present. I don't know. I like the exercise in the beginning. When I did it, when I read the book and then I paused and I was like, what is it? I think it's a nice way to almost force yourself into presence. Yeah.
But I mean, with that, like, yeah, it forces you to be in the present, but it goes back to what I think I said earlier, to be like, if you consciously want to think about something, then you're sort of going against what we naturally do. Sorry, to just be constantly in a state of thought. Like, we're always thinking of different things. But the only way to sort of kind of pause that is to sort of, I want to almost say, like, track and be intentional, to be like, I want to capture what the next thought is, and only then are you able to sort of not think of anything. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. It's like, when you're actually trying to catch what the next thought is, like you just said, it's like, it takes a while, because your brain is now all of a sudden like hypervigilant to be like, what's the thought? But in actual sense, it's like our minds are always wandering wild, you know, there's just so much going on, and that's why it's like such a noisy place and everything. And again, like we said in the beginning, for him, it was like he was always in that state of anxiety. And so, but when he took that moment, and which is, I feel like, as a part of the exercise, you'd be like, I actually want to know definitively what I am thinking of next. And then all of a sudden, nothing, you know, and then it comes in.
Yeah. But I think it's not, that is a very helpful way to sort of almost pause yourself from thinking. But I think another way is just often like the things that people do for meditation, where it's like, okay, focus on some part of your body, or focus on your breath, or those kinds of things. I think that also, just having that singular, simple focus also, I think, clears one's mind quite a bit. And it can also sort of make one a bit more present. Yeah. I also thought it was interesting, the flower thing. It's like you can observe a flower and be like, and label it as beautiful, versus really experiencing the beauty. I think a lot more of the time I end up labeling things. Like I find it interesting. If I go and watch a sunset, it's very rare for me to be able to see the sunset as beautiful in the same way that I observe others seeing it. Like a lot of people, it seems like when they go and see a sunset, they can just like sit in awe of it. And I end up disappointing Eckhart in that situation, because I end up thinking about the thoughts. So I'm maybe not exactly in the just pure mental prison, but I can't just enjoy the present always. I find it quite difficult to do. Whereas for some reason, it seems like other people put a sunset in front of them and then they're just like, okay, nice.
I think for me, like that, when it would like it's hikes. Like I even remember telling someone something, and he was like, okay, so like you get, I've hiked with a few groups, a number of people, and like, there are those people that just want to rest to the end. And then there's like me that I try to soak in, and it varies. There are moments where I'm like focused, especially if like the terrain is, but again, like I said, it's people just label it to be like, oh, hike because the routes are scenic, just like you've said. But when they're actually on the hike, to them, it's just about finishing and not actually enjoying the surrounding and, what nature has to offer. So, yeah.
Yeah. I hope that I can become more like that. I too often, like, in that sense, I do think the book is accurate. I way too often am caught up in thought of some other thing that's instead of just being in that moment. Yeah. Okay. The inner body. So page 89. I'm still not quite sure if I fully understand what you mean by being. Water, and then Tolle answers, water, do you know what I mean by that? I don't understand it. Is what a fish would say if it had a human mind. Please stop trying to understand being. You have already had significant glimpses of being, but the mind will always try and squeeze it into a little box and then put a label on it. It cannot be done. Then on page 90, look beyond the words. A word is no more than a means to an end. It's an abstraction. Not unlike a signpost, it points beyond itself. The word honey isn't honey. You can study and talk about honey for as long as you like, but you won't really know it until you taste it. The reverse also applies. If for whatever reason you dislike the word honey, that might prevent you from ever tasting it. If you had a strong aversion to the word God, which is the negative form of attachment, you may be denying not just the word, but the reality to which it points. Then, going to 92, you are cut off from being as long as your mind takes up all your attention. And then 95. Others try to escape from the body by entering trance-like states or seeking out outer-body experiences. Many still do. Even the Buddha said to have practiced some body denial through fasting and extreme forms of asceticism for 6 years. But he did not attain enlightenment until after he had given up this practice. The fact is that no one has ever become enlightened through denial or fighting the body, or through an outer-body experience. Transformation is through the body, not away from it. This is why no true master has ever advocated for fighting or leaving the body, although their mind-based followers often have. Then 97. If you keep your attention in the body as much as possible, you will be anchored in the now. You won't lose yourself in the external world, and you won't lose yourself in your mind. Please examine where your attention is at the moment. Are you listening to me, or are you reading the words in this book? See if you can be in touch with your inner body at the same time. Keep some of your attention within. It is almost as if you were listening or reading with your whole body. Let this be your practice in the days and weeks to come. Then on 98. Unless you stay present and inhabiting your body is always an essential aspect of it, you will continue to be run by your mind. The script in your head that learned long time ago, the conditioning of your mind, will dictate your thinking and your behavior, especially true when something goes wrong. Your conditioned reaction will then be fueled by one basic emotion that underlies the mind-identified state of consciousness: fear. And Then on page 102, another benefit of this practice is the physical realm. Practice in the physical realm is the great strengthening of the immune system, which occurs when you inhabit the body. The more consciousness you bring to the body, the stronger your immune system becomes. Most illnesses creep in when you are not present in the body. If the master is not present in the house, all kinds of shady characters will take up residence there. When you inhabit your body, it will be hard for unwanted guests to enter. And then on 105, the art of listening. When listening to another person, don't just listen with your mind, listen with your whole body. Most people don't know how to listen because the major part of their attention is taken up by thinking. They pay more attention to that than to what the other person is saying, and none at all to what really matters, the being of the other person underneath the words and the mind. The most human relationships consist mainly out of minds interacting with each other, not of human beings communicating, being in communion. That is the end of the inner body. What are your thoughts, Peter?
I don't have much to say from that chapter, but just from some of the sort of sections, it's sorry, I'm just trying to get to it. It's like the strengthening of the immune system. Like, it's just picking one from it's what I get from it is more of kind of being in tune with one's body, in the sense of, I think so often we kind of say it, and I'm just also like thinking, like a random thought that came to my mind about I know this is like digressing, but we're asking like for tips of like running, to be like, or do you prefer running with music? And my one friend was like, no, I prefer just running because I actually want to listen to how I breathe, and to me that was like very interesting. Like, I mean, I've never been a runner, to be like, that's actually quite interesting to be like, to him, that's what's in, because it's like, if I'm breathing, if my breaths now are different, then I know that something's wrong and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I've actually never thought of that, when it comes to, and that to me now, taking it back, it's like, that's when you like fully immersed, so actually understanding what's happening around you, to be like so tapped in, to be like, your body doesn't say anything, but if you're in tune with it, it will tell you what's wrong. That's why I picked them in. So like, before you, let's say, before something happens, like your body will give you those early signs before you, let's say, fully break out into a flu and whatnot. The reason why I say that, it's like that's what this chapter for me is sort of driving down, to be like, with everything, transforming through your body, like, you have to pay attention, to what the body is sort of saying in essence. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of summarizing it. And I don't think I'll really add much to the points that you've made. I think the only other thing, but it's not adding to the points, it's more like just a side comment, is I really like the idea of the honey.
Oh,
And
yes.
I think it's a really nice illustration where the idea of what something is sometimes, like what he says, being and those kinds of things, the idea of it and the experience of it are two different things. Like the sunset thing as well. Like I can explain a sunset maybe very well and in vivid detail, but to experience it is something completely different. And we might be repulsed by the idea of something, but actually, like the word or the explanation or something, but actually the experience of it, we end up realizing, like, oh, actually, like honey, if you don't like the word honey for some reason, and you're like, therefore I'm never going to try honey, which doesn't necessarily make sense. But if you can only know if you like honey if you've tasted honey. You can't know it by the word alone. Yeah. But I don't think I have anything else to add.
I was going to say, for the idea, to bust that idea, it's the same as, I don't know, I think I've joked about this. It's like, the grapes and olives. Like the reason I hate olives isn't because I don't like, okay, I'm they're growing onto me now, but it's the whole thing of like, it looks like a grape, doesn't taste like a grape. It's like
that was my experience of an olive as well. I thought the salad had grapes in it, and it was not grapes. So, and I still don't think my pain body has given up that trauma.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, should we go on to chapter 7?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. This is a mystical one. Portals into the unmanifested. So I think before we read the unmanifested thing, I'm going to read a snippet again, just trying to explain some stuff. But I don't think I understand it still. But here we go. Okay. So the manifested is in Eckhart Tolle's concepts, the manifested is everything that has form. So a thing that is manifested. So your body, your thoughts, emotions, trees, plants, sound, time, events, those are all the manifested things. Then there's being, which we've discussed before. And being is kind of the living presence or awareness that can be experienced directly through the present moment. So your direct experience of awareness is being. And then the unmanifested is the formless source or ground of being itself. Unlike being, Tolle says that this is not something you can experience as an object. It is what being ultimately is or comes from. That unawareness is ultimately is. What that awareness ultimately is. Sorry. And then when Tolle talks about portals into the unmanifested, he doesn't literally mean gateways or supernatural events. He means experiences that temporarily loosen your identification with forms. So like your thoughts, your bodies, your emotions, those kind of things. So he means experiences that temporarily loosen your identification with forms, allowing awareness to become more present, which is the same way of saying allowing you to be, right? In his view, as awareness becomes more apparent, you are simultaneously becoming closer to the unmanifested, because being is an expression of the unmanifested. So there's the unmanifested, and then somehow it's like manifesting itself. And when you are, I don't know, I'm going to fail to explain it, but There we go. I tried something. But I think the most helpful sentence in my mind is that part where it's he means experiences that temporarily loosen your identification with forms. So you're identified with almost like physical things, and the portals into the unmanifested are loosening your identification with those physical things, those manifested things. Okay. Here we go. Starting on page 109. Now let your spiritual practice be this. As you go about your life, don't give 100% of your attention to the external world and your mind. Keep some within. I have spoken about this already. Feel the inner body when engaged in everyday activities, especially engaged in relationships or when you are relating with nature. Feel the stillness deep inside you. Keep the portal open. Then to page 111. Another portal to the unmanifested is created through cessation of thinking or stopping thinking. This can start with a very simple thing, such as taking one conscious breath or looking in a state of intense alertness at a flower, so that there's no mental commentary running at the same time. And then continuous mind activity keeps you imprisoned in the world of form and becomes an opaque screen that prevents you from becoming conscious of the unmanifested. Surrender, the letting go of mental emotional resistance to what is, also becomes a portal to the unmanifested. The reason for this is simple. Inner resistance cuts you from other people, from yourself, and from the world around you. And then another one on page 112. Are there any other portals apart from those you just mentioned? And then he says, yes, there are. Silence. Every sound is born out of silence, dies back into silence, and during its lifespan is surrounded by silence. Silence enables the sound to be. It is an intrinsic but unmanifested part of every sound, every musical note, every song, every word. The unmanifested is the present in the world as silence, is present in the world as silence. And then he says another one is space. Just as no sound can exist without silence, nothing can exist without no thing, without the empty space that enables it to be. Then 114. I'm giving you pointers to show you how you can bring a dimension of the unmanifested into your life. We are not trying to understand it. There is nothing to understand. And then that is it. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think just to add, it's just, and I know it's probably going to tie in with the end. It's the whole the letting go of mental emotion resistance to what is, like to tap into, and again, just as it said, goes on to be like silence is what births sounds, and then the space. So it's almost seemingly that to tap into those, again, I probably need more unpacking of the chapter, but to tap into those portals of the unmanifested, or of what doesn't exist, or to discover what doesn't exist, you have to be still, essentially. I think that's kind of what comes to mind in this, like using the silent example is like, or even better is like to know that there's light, there has to be darkness, and what's light? It's like the absence of light, and exactly similar to that. For sound to be birthed, there has to be silence for you to identify a distinct pitch or frequency. But yeah, it was just for me the mental, letting go of the mental emotional resistance to what is. I think we struggle with. Oh, maybe not we. I struggle. It's like always wanting to be in control. And again, it's going back to the now. It's like you have to be present, which means you sort of have to read of everything around you. The inner body is like you have to listen to it. And to do that, you don't have to project what might be wrong, but rather be focused and be present about what is internally happening. So
yeah. So
I know that was a bit of like the mumbo jumbo the magazine talked about, but yeah.
Yeah. It is a bit of an interesting one. But I think something maybe just to clarify as well is, and I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but you said something about the unmanifested being I don't know if you said not real or something like that.
No, like what isn't there essentially, but yeah. What doesn't exist,
so,
like...
Yeah, what doesn't exist. And I think you're not like completely wrong there, but because that's a way that we can try and grasp at it. But I think what he's trying to say is that the unmanifested is almost the ultimate underlying thing. So to say that it doesn't exist is some sense it's correct because it's not manifested. So in that sense it is accurate. But it's Anyway, I'm trying to take stabs.
And I get what you're trying to say, Paul. My thought process of it, and your point is exactly what I was trying to kind of say the opposite of, not opposite of, but to sort of explain to be like, what is unmanifested doesn't mean doesn't exist, but you sort of need certain conditions for you to identify the existence of that thing. I don't know if that's making... I know that's also a lot of mumbo jumbo, which then relates to what I'm saying. It's like, you know that there's music, but to know that music exists, there has to be silence.
Yes, yeah. There's some backdrop, and that backdrop is silent.
And it's the same as... to know that light exists, there has to be darkness, which is essentially the absence of light. But then there actually is light. But the mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, I think the silence one is a good analogy for trying to understand what he's saying. So and I do not have anything else. Okay, then the next one, enlightened relationships. So that's starting on page 121. Salvation is nowhere else in place or time. It is here and now. What does that statement mean? Salvation is here and now. Most people pursue physical pleasures or various forms of psychological gratification because they believe that those things will make them happy or free them from feeling or lack of fear or lack. This is the search for salvation from the state of unsatisfactoriness or insufficiency. Invariably, any satisfaction that they obtain is short-lived, so the condition of satisfaction or fulfillment is usually projected once again into an imaginary point away from the here and now. When I obtain this, or am free from that, then I will be okay. Then a bit further down. There's only one point of access, the now. There can be no salvation away from this moment. You are lonely and without a partner. Enter the now from there. You are in a relationship. Enter the now from there. 123. This may be hard to grasp for the mind accustomed to thinking that everything worthwhile is in the future. Then, carrying on, 125. The reason why romantic love relationships are such an intense and universally sought after experience is that it seems to offer liberation from a deep-seated state of fear, need, lack, and incompleteness that is part of the human condition in its unredeemed and unenlightened state. On the physical level, you are obviously not whole, nor will you ever be. You are either man or woman, which is to say one half of a whole. Then on the next page. But then that special relationship comes along, and it seems to be the answer to all ego's problems, to all unmet needs. At least this is how it appears at first. You are no longer a disconnected fragment in an uncaring universe, or so it seems. Your world now has a center, the loved one. What matters is the underlying feelings of incompleteness, of fear, lack, and unfulfillment so characteristic of the egoic state are no longer there, or are they? Have they dissolved, or do they continue to exist underneath the happy surface reality? It is likely that you are confusing ego attachment and addictive clinging with love. You cannot love your partner one moment and attack him or her the next. True love has no opposite. If your love has an opposite, then it is not love, but a strong ego need for some more complete and deeper sense of self, a need that the other person temporarily meets. But there comes a point when your partner behaves in ways that fail to meet your needs. Part of the egoic consciousness has been covered up by the love relationship, now resurfaces. Then on the next page, every addiction arises from an unconscious refusal to face and move through your own pain. Every addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. Whatever the substance you are addicted to, drugs or a person, they do not cause pain and unhappiness. They bring out the pain and unhappiness that is already in you. Every addiction does that. Then 128. The greatest catalyst for change in relationship is complete acceptance of your partner as he or she is, without needing to judge or change them in any way. That immediately takes you beyond the ego. And then 134. If your partner is still identified with the mind and pain body, this will represent a major challenge, not to you, but to your partner. It is not easy to live with an enlightened person, or rather, it is so easy that the ego finds it extremely threatening. Remember that the ego needs problems, conflict, and enemies to strengthen its sense of separateness on which its identity depends. And then 138. As a general rule, a major obstacle for men tends to be the thinking mind, and the major obstacle for women, the pain body, though in a certain individual case the opposite may be true, and in others two factors may be equal. And then on 140, the first thing to remember is this: as long as you make an identity for yourself out of pain, you cannot become free of it. As long as part of your sense of self is invested in your emotional pain, you will unconsciously resist or sabotage every attempt you make to heal that pain. And that is it for the chapter. Enlightened relationships. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting chapter. I think I had a lot of things that made sense when I was listening to the audiobook, because it was a struggle reading it with time. But yeah, one thing that stood out to me, and I know it's not necessarily related to relation, but they sort of use it to be like you have to sort of be addicted to your partner and stuff. But it then has that part which I feel like goes broader to just relation to, and kind of also I think can be used to like substances to be like the reason you get to addictions is actually through pain, and it only ends in pain. You become addicted to, or you resort into using something to get away of pain, but ultimately end up there. Which is just essentially for me also closely related to the pain body, to be like, it's not good to sort of jump into a relationship when you haven't actually dealt with your pain, your inner pain, or pain body, And another thing that got to me, or that stood out to me as well, is the whole thing of if you get an enlightened person. So, and I'm guessing an enlightened person is someone that has a good understanding of their pain body as to someone who's not. And it's kind of how it says that it's all well and good, but eventually your partner's pain body will start to show up, and that can also cause a strain. And that as well is very true, and it's kind of hard to sort of also deal with that. How can I put it? Having to highlight their pain body in a bad way. I think it's one of those that has to be dealt with care, But yeah, it was an interesting, also one of the more practical chapters, I guess.
Yeah. I think the way that you put it, with the kind of essentially make sure that you are ready before going into a relationship, that you are in a state where you aren't getting into the relationship for the sake of your ego, but you're getting in a relationship because you actually care about the person, not what they can do for you, but or the like needs and desires that they satisfy for you, but just because you genuinely care for that person, which of course in reality, often all of those things are mixed and intertwined, and I think that's okay. But I think it's very dangerous for a person who desperately wants to be in a relationship to be in a relationship. It's very likely that someone who desperately wants to be in a relationship will end up being disappointed because of either the relationship doesn't meet what they expected of it, or because they expect so much from the other person. It could vary, but yeah. Right, should we go on to the next chapter? Chapter 9. Yep. Cool. Okay, so the next chapter is called Beyond Happiness and Unhappiness, There's Peace. So on 147, it says, is there a difference between happiness and inner peace? And he says, yes. Happiness depends on the conditions being perceived as positive. Inner peace does not. Do you truly know what is positive and what is negative? Have you got the total picture? There have been many people for whom limitation, failure, loss, illness, or pain, in whatever form, turned out to be their greatest teacher. It gave them depth, humility, and compassion. It made them more real. Seen from a higher perspective, conditions are always positive. To be more precise, they are neither positive nor negative. They are as they are. Then on page 149, accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny. for what could be more aptly fit for your needs. This was written 2,000 years ago by Marcus Aurelius, one of those exceedingly rare humans who possessed worldly power as well as wisdom. And then on page 153, the cyclical nature of the universe is closely linked with the impermanence of all things and situations. The Buddha made this a central part of his teaching. All conditions are highly unstable and in constant flux, or, as he put it, impermanence is a characteristic of every condition, every situation you will ever encounter in your life. Impermanence is also central to Jesus' teaching. Do not lay up yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. Then a bit further down. Nothing lasts in this dimension where moth and rust consume. Either it ends, or it changes, or it may undergo a polarity shift. The same condition that was yesterday or last year has suddenly or gradually turned into the same good condition yesterday or last year has suddenly or gradually turned into bad. The same condition that made you happy then makes you unhappy. The prosperity of today becomes the empty consumerism of tomorrow. Then 155. It seems almost paradoxical, yet when your inner dependency on form is gone, the general conditions of your life, the outer forms, tend to improve greatly. The things, people, conditions that you thought you need for your happiness now come to you with no struggle or effort on your part, and you are free to enjoy them and appreciate them while they last. With dependencies gone, there is no fear of loss anymore, and life flows with ease. The happiness that is derived from some secondary source is never very deep. It is only a pale reflection of the joy of being. Then 159. There's a novel by Aldous Huxley called Ireland, written in his later years when he became very interested in spiritual teachings. It tells us of the story of a man shipwrecked on a remote island, cut off from the rest of the world. This island contains a unique civilization. The unusual thing about its inhabitants, unlike the rest of the world, are that they are actually sane. The first thing the man notices are the colorful parrots perched on the trees. They seem to be constantly croaking the words, "Attention, here and now, attention, here and now." We later learn that the islanders taught them these words in order to be reminded continuously to stay present. And then let's see if there's more. Yeah, one more. Furthermore, to recognize the primacy of being and thus work on the level of cause does not exclude the possibility that your compassion may simultaneously be manifest on the level of doing or of effect by alleviating suffering wherever you come across it. As you give bread, even though your interaction may only be very brief, what really matters is the moment of shared being, of which the bread is only a symbol. Yeah. What are your thoughts there, Peter?
Yeah, I don't have much from this, but I can try to recall some of the things that stood up. I mean, there was one thing that while reading this, and so often we strive to think that we're so different, and I think it was stemming from the whole thing of how in one moment, from the beginning of the end of the relationship, they are the source of the same people that are essentially your source of your happiness, can cause you sort of unhappiness when it all ends. But then let us say that when people have interaction, we always try to say we're different, but we're actually more similar than we kind of someone to let on, and again, that's one thing that we should sort of, how can I put it, but I'm trying to think of a way of how I illustrated that when I was listening to it, to be like, it's more, it should be more comforting that we're actually more similar than different to others. I don't know if that makes sense, but also like the one thing, and again, it's from the Bible, I think, about the whole storing up of treasures. That at the end of it, all that really, it doesn't make sense. Like those, depending on what it is that you saw there, moth and like things rust and people even still, that shouldn't be, the primary goal of why we live. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that idea of everything is impermanent, that kind of things come and go, and we should appreciate them as they are here, but to hold on to them so tightly and to sort of pin your life on them is not going to end up in a good state, because at some point either some drastic thing will happen, or circumstances will change, or just time will make things different, and that's kind of the natural flow of things. And so I think if we focus on the now, that helps a lot. But if we constantly in the like ego side of things, then the egoic self, then we're constantly worried about the future, or worried about the past, or I also found it interesting, and I think that it's true. I think a lot of people would sort of say that they can identify with this in some loose sense. But the whole idea of where it says it almost seems paradoxical, yet when your inner dependency on form is gone, so when your inner dependency on almost like the outcome of a thing is gone, the general conditions of your life and the outer forms tend to improve greatly. Things, people, conditions, basically things happen more naturally and more easily. The things that you wanted to achieve become more easy to achieve, and the things that don't matter to you as much, sometimes even those things happen more easily. And I think sometimes we get so stuck in the idea, and I know that this is true for me, sometimes we get so stuck in the idea of achieving something that it kind of just consumes our mind to the point where we can't actually do the thing, if that makes sense. And that's very much the egoic self consuming consuming everything. All right, should we go on to the next one, the last chapter? Cool. The meaning of surrender. So starting on 171. Surrender is the simple but profound wisdom of yielding to rather than opposing the flow of life. The only place where you can experience the flow of life is now. So to surrender is to accept the present moment unconditionally and without reservation. It is to relinquish the inner resistance to what is. Then on 172, surrender is a purely inner phenomenon. It does not mean that on the outer level you cannot take action and change the situation. Then on 174, In the state of surrender, you see very clearly what needs to be done and what needs to be done, and you take action, doing one thing at a time and focusing on one thing at a time. Learning from nature, see how everything gets accomplished and how the miracle of life unfolds without dissatisfaction or unhappiness. That's why Jesus said, "Look at the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin." Then a bit later, focus not on 100 things that you will or may have to do at some point in the future, but on the one thing that you can do now. Then on 175, don't confuse surrender with an attitude of I can't be bothered anymore, or I don't care anymore. If you look at it closely, you will find that such an attitude is tainted with negativity in the form of hidden resentment, and so is not surrender, but it is rather a masked form of resistance. And then 177. They are cut off from being, so they unconsciously attempt to get energy and power from you. Or maybe just to read the question that is posed. What about people who want to use me, manipulate me, or control me? Am I to surrender to them? And then he says, they are cut off from being, so they unconsciously attempt to get energy and power from you. It is true that only an unconscious person will try to use or manipulate others, but it is equally true that only an unconscious person can be used or manipulated. It is perfectly possible to say a firm no and clearly to a person or walk away from a situation and be in a state of complete and inner non-resistance at the same time. Let it be a non-reactive no, a high-quality no, a no that is free of all negativity and so creates no further suffering. And then 181. Surrender does not form what is, at least not directly. Surrender transforms you. When you are transformed, your whole world is transformed, because the world is only a reflection. If you looked in the mirror and did not like what you saw, you would have to be mad to attack the image in the mirror. And then 188. Enlightenment, consciously chosen, means to relinquish your attachment to the past and future and to make the now the main focus of your life. It means choosing to dwell in the state of presence rather than in time. What about all those people who seem to actually want to suffer? I have a friend whose partner is physically abusive towards her. I know that word choose, but it isn't entirely accurate in this context. It's misleading to say that somebody chose a dysfunctional relationship or any other negative situation in his or her life. Choice implies consciousness, a high degree of consciousness. Without it, you have no choice. This means that you're compelled to feel, think, and act in certain ways according to the conditioning of your mind. That's why Jesus said, "Forgive them, they do not know what they do." I have met many highly intelligent and educated people who are also completely unconscious, which is to say, completely identified with their mind. Your friend is stuck in a relationship with an abusive partner, and not for the first time. Why? No choice. The mind, conditioned as by the past, always seeks to recreate what it knows and is familiar with. Even if it is painful, at least it is familiar. And then 190. As long as your mind, with its conditioned patterns, runs your life, as long as you are your mind, what choice do you have? None. You are not even there. And then a bit further down. If you are run by your mind, although you have no choice, you will suffer the consequences of your unconscious actions, and you will create further suffering. And then lastly on 191. How do I get to that point of realization? When you surrender to what is and become fully present, the past ceases to have any power. You do not need it anymore. Presence is the key. Now is the key. And how will I know when I have surrendered? You will, when you no longer need to ask the question. That is it. The meaning of surrender and the last chapter of The Power of Now. What are your thoughts on that, Peter?
For me, not much. Rather, there was a lot. It was very, very information loaded. But the one thing that I want to say or highlight is the high quality no. I don't know if you remember that section of like having high quality no's. And the reason why I'm saying that, it went on to say about how when you get to a point of surrender, you are not reactive, and I think I did mention this in the beginning of how that was a section that I liked in this book, to be like, to be in the moment. And when you respond to others, the moment you deal with the situation for what it is and not you being reactive, like not being defensive in a situation, then it takes you again letting go of your ego, like putting that down, putting that aside, and actually reacting to something for what it is. And it takes that surrender, and which then results like in a situation where someone's trying to manipulate to do something. That's where the high quality no sort of comes from. So yeah, to me, I think that was the one part that I wanted to highlight, and the one part that that was my key takeaway for that chapter. Yeah,
that's a great one. The high quality no, definitely something to keep in mind. The two sort of main takeaways for me for that chapter is the one which I'd spoken about before as well, of just basically when you surrender to the now and stop focusing on the past and the future and what was and what could be, and you just do things in the now, I think it makes a big difference to the things that you are able to do. It's almost, to put it in a cheesy way, the things that you do are more genuine. And so the things that you make, or the things, your relationships, the interactions that you have, the quality of those relationships become better because you are really present, rather than your attention being split in a million places. So I think that's the one thing. And then the other thing was that the discussion towards the end of the dysfunctional relationship. And I think just that idea of how we really need to be careful to not let our past drive the present, especially in the case where we've had a more difficult past. If you've had a easier past, like I would consider myself in that category, then it's not as much of a big deal. In fact, it can sometimes be good because you've fortunately had good influences on your life, and they've kind of almost naturally shaped you in a way to not run into those difficulties, whether it's like troubled relationships or abusive substances or whatever the case is. But yeah, it seems like Eckhart Tolle is saying, if you do struggle with those things, trying to focus on the now and sort of just taking the next best step, because you're truly focused on the present moment, not the past or the future, is a good way to deal with it. And as he says in the concluding part, how do you know when you get to that point? When you surrender to what is and become fully present, the past ceases to have any power and you do not need it anymore. The present is the key. Yeah. All right. Final thoughts, Peter. What did you think of the book? What are your final takes?
Yeah, tough read, but other than that, yes, as much as, and I think we say this way a lot, like as much as, yes, probably one of the books we had or disagreed with some of the things that were said, but the underlying points or the main points, we're still able to take certain takeaways from the book or from the different chapters.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't, you know, one way you kind of said, like, I shouldn't have read this. But yeah, I think just like, you know, like thinking back, like that really last point for me also drove it home. As much as they didn't mention it, to be like, you know, when you sort of stuck in certain situation that become a norm, as like you said, difficulty, that you then seek them out, or they are what becomes more comfortable. You actually need to be aware, to be like, you need to let go, be in the now, and those things stop having a hold on you. I think that really is important. But yeah, interesting book. Probably need to, one of those that you'd probably want to read again slow. I think for me, I probably would need to do that, because now it is like pressed for time, you know. But like I said, yes, as much as we had a lot of disclaimers about what the book is, again, like I said, every or most chapters had very, very important takeaways from it. As much as there might be a lot of information surrounding, but the main points were driven in.
So I think it was a very interesting book, like you said, quite a difficult read, and at the same time it's like a very simple read. If it's not for the language, that's the part that made it challenging. But yeah, I am still not 100% sure what to make of the book, but I can definitely agree with you that there was a lot of things that you can take away and reflect on, and I think a lot of useful insights that I will try and keep in mind. And I do think that that it's a book that sort of shapes a bit the way that you think about your day-to-day life and what is important and what you focus on, and all the disclaimers and that we've mentioned included. I think, yeah, it's an interesting read, and I can see why so many people have read it. I can also see why there's been so many things like the Times wrote about the book. But yeah, there's lots of interesting takeaways. But yeah, I think that is it then. Until next time, Peter.
Until next time. Cheers.
Cool. Cheers.